started in just a minute or two. Thank you for being prompt and being with us. We'll get started in just a moment. I like to invite folks as they arrive to remove a distraction. I know I can speak for myself when doing these types of programs online. It can be so tempting to be surrounded by distractions. But I invite you to remove a distraction, to settle in, maybe get some water, maybe a pen or paper, whatever you need to be present and fully arrive. I invite you to take a moment to arrive, and I'll get us started here in just about a minute. Beautiful. Well, that might have been less than a minute, but I will dive in. As I mentioned, my name is Lena Blunt. I'm the Education Coordinator at Pendle Hill. And I want to thank you all for joining us in the experiment that is Pendle Hill. We're in our 91st year of experimenting at the intersection of spirituality and justice. And these first Monday lectures are a great opportunity to get a taste of what we're up to. So we have these lectures on the first Monday of every month, free and open to the public, and currently all on Zoom. So if this is your first Monday with us, welcome. We invite you to consider joining us next month, and we're so glad that you can join us. I'm going to orient folks a little bit to the technology tonight. A little bit to our agenda. I'll share a little bit about Pendle Hill, and then I'll invite us into some silent meditation, or as Quakers like to say, silent worship. And then Jan will speak out of that silence. You may notice that you can only chat to the hosts. This is an intentional choice that we make on these Zoom calls to cut down on any cross chat and help us stay really focused on the message that our guests are sharing with us. So thank you for understanding that. At the end of Jan's remarks tonight, there will be a question and answer time, and we like to moderate those question and answers. So you can submit your questions really at any time as they come to you through this evening in the chat to me, and I will be sort of synthesizing the questions we receive that'll allow me to help draw out themes, to highlight questions that lots of people are sharing, and it also helps us to not have repeat questions. So just to let you know, that question and answer session is coming. Please do keep track of your questions throughout. You can send them to me at any time, and I'll be sort of moderating that section. Though we are all online, we're also all in a number of physical places. I'm speaking to you tonight from Philadelphia, the traditional land of the Lenape people, also known as Lenapehoking. It's also the land on which Pendle Hill is situated. Lenape means original people, and they are respected as the grandfathers by other Native Americans in the Algonquin language family, which has inhabited the North American continent east of the Appalachian Mountains. Lenapehoking stretches from the source of the Delaware River to its mouth, taking in the Schuylkill and Lehigh River systems and what is now eastern Pennsylvania, all of what is now New Jersey, and a large northeastern swath of what is now Delaware and both sides of the Hudson River, from a point above Albany to its mouth, and including all of New York City and the western tip of Long Island. We also love to encourage folks to remember that despite colonization and violence and disease, many Lenape peoples stayed behind in Lenapehoking, hidden in plain sight, and are very much alive today. Today, there are 3 state-recognized Lenape tribal nations within the original Lenapehoking: the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape Nation near Bridgeton, New Jersey, the Lenape Indian Tribe of Delaware in Cheswold, Delaware, and the Ramapo Lenape Nation near Mahwah, New Jersey. Pendle Hill is in relationship with the tribal leadership of these nations. And we like to start our programs just honoring that history, honoring the land on which Pendle Hill is located. I just want to take a breath to honor that and to invite folks to be curious about the land in which you are on, and maybe you too can honor the heritage you know there. I'm really pleased this evening to introduce Jan Phillips as our speaker on evolutionary creativity, bridging creativity, spirituality, and social action. Jan's the founder and executive director of the Living Kindness Foundation, currently engaged in anti-racism work throughout the United States. She's taught in over 23 countries and has had her work published in the New York Times, Spiritual and Health National Catholic Reporter, as well as a number of other publications. She's a writer, musician, and photographer, the author of 10 award-winning books, most recently Still on Fire, Field Notes from a Queer Mystic, published in October 2021 by Unity Books. She's released 3 albums of original music and created a YouTube channel of short videos that provoke thought and evoke action. We may get a taste of some of that tonight. And you can see her events and products on her website, www.janphillips.com. Before I pass it over to Jan for tonight, I'd like to invite us all to settle into silence. And Jan, please speak out of the silence as you are led. Thank you all for joining us. And I will enable the live transcript. Thank you for that request.
Well, anyone who's ever done a retreat with me knows I would never do a silent retreat. Much as I value silence in my own life, it's the vitality of these kinds of gatherings that cause us to evolve further along the spiral that we're evolving on. So my hope for these, my commitment for these 90 minutes is that we're going to have an exchange of ideas, and it will cause all of us to be somewhere further along than we were when we clicked on this Zoom link. So the title is Evolutionary Creativity, because I think that there's a big distinction between creativity in general and evolutionary creativity. So let's just define it at first as a kind of creativity that has the commons in its mind, that cares about our common world, our common connectedness, our commonness with sisters and brothers around the globe. I think particularly something happened that white America woke up, some of us, in a whole new way after George Floyd, and recognized that that was a pivotal moment in our country's history. And usually pivotal moments that move us forward are associated with tragedy and trauma. It's just, I don't know, is that the nature of humankind, that we need a bonk on the head in order to learn anything? Maybe. So I have a couple videos that are, I think we're gonna watch, at least the first one. I just watched it on my bed a few minutes ago, and I thought, yeah, this would be good for us. It's called We Are the Creators. And it starts with the chanting from the Sami tribes people. It's an indigenous tribe way up north in the Arctic Circle. And they've maintained some of their beautiful culture. So you'll hear them chanting their Sami folk tunes in the beginning of this. But it's my interpretation and my kind of letting people know through a video, what do I mean by our creativity? And cuts through a lot of confusion. So I think that we'll just start by watching this. It goes fast, it's 10 minutes, but if you'll start it, Lena, then we'll go ahead and watch it and then do something after.
Lo le ho lo la lo e ho e la lo le lo a go he lo e la ho he yo la lo e la o yo e la la le lo e lo.
Hi there, I'm Jan Phillips, and I'm here to talk a little bit about why we create. Because so many of us seem disenchanted with our own creative process, discouraged about what we do or fail to do. And sometimes it helps to just take a look at it from another perspective. So I'm going to suggest that we think of ourselves as progeny of creation itself, as a child of the earth and the heavens. No matter what two human individuals came together to cause our conception and our birth, on a higher level, we're the children of the cosmos. We're the actual fingers of creation reaching toward the future. That we are creative forces that can't be anything but creators because we belong to creation. We are creation. We're part of the action of evolution. It's occurring through us as well as to us. To create for human beings is to be in our natural state, which is the state where joy is, where the present moment is, where we experience our bliss. One would think of it as a spiritual practice, as a diligent endeavor that we engage in with a level of commitment and a level of consciousness as to this is the thing we do to stay centered, to heal ourselves. Many times when you think of the events that have caused you to be disrupted or caused you turmoil or caused you to feel like you are ensconced in a tragedy, that is an unmastered ordeal. And it's an ordeal that you might consider was invited to you by the hugeness of your soul, which is looking for grist for its creative mill. Your soul is calling out day and night, bring me adventure, bring me big experience. So big experience comes our way, and it often feels like tragedy or calamity or catastrophe, because that's the onslaught of a big experience. That's often its initial impact and our response to it. But in fact, when you consider that it's a gift of a kind, it's what you have to work with. Like Michelangelo had marble, or Mozart had the musical scales. Our human experience is what we have to work with in order to create something, in order to make something of the events of our lives. When we actually sit to do the creative work, it is true that mind at large is collaborating with us. I think every artist I've ever talked to has that experience. When it's not religious, it's not whether you believe in God or not. It's just that when you are inspired and you're doing work, you feel that inspiration is flowing through you, that it's an organic, physiological experience. You just feel a movement from within. You never wait until you feel that lift to begin your work, because that lift, that assist, comes to you as a reward for sitting there, for being at your workbench. It never comes before. So we want to be thinking of it as our natural process is to create. That's the act we engage in. That's like going to the clinic. It's the thing that heals us, that grounds us and centers us, so that we're fully in the present moment. And we all know when we're in the present moment, we cannot be hurt. But in the present moment, there is only light, there's only love, and there's only the now. And in that present moment, everyone is safe. So the question is, how can I get there? How can I stay there? The answer is through your creative work. And what happens ultimately when we do that, when we commit ourselves and get to the workbench and create the thing that we're called to create, when we begin to master our ordeals, to take that catastrophe, to process it, to do the forgiving, to do the mastering until it becomes itself a kind of masterpiece of our own, that we turn that event into a work of art. So that's what the creative process looks like and does for us. And what it does for the world is it lights up the world, because when you express to the community around you the creation that you have achieved, then there's a thing that goes on in the minds and the hearts and the spirits of the people that sounds like, if she can, I can. Or if they can, we can. We're uplifted and encouraged by the creations of others. This is what lights the world. It's what lights our lives. It's what causes our hopes, our visions to become real, to materialize into a force that has an energy that moves people to think new ways, to act in new ways, and to be agents of change, and agents of comfort, and agents of compassion, so that the cutting edge of this culture really is in the hands of the creators. It's in the hands of those who say, I have a consciousness to transform what has happened to me into a new shape that can feed other people. And from that action, I receive the light, the healing energy, and the continuation of love and support from the cosmos that I am here to receive. So it's a natural act. It's the thing that causes us to know bliss, to share bliss, and to stay in the state of bliss. Our creative work is what is the light of the world. Thank you.
Well, all right. I'm not seeing all of you. Let me change my view. I don't want to just look at myself. I want to look at the gallery of you. There we go. So let's review. What we're talking about is not the typical creativity that leads to things like books and CDs and poetry things. That is included in our definition. But even more than that is to think of ourselves as born creators. And we have the number one responsibility to create our lives. So that's the primary thing that we're creating, right? I created that we would be in this group today, and I got Lena to go along with it, right? Because I want to be with people. These are terrible, isolating times. And so we're doing our best to figure out how to be together. The area of creativity, spiritual intelligence, and social action are the three things that I weave together like a Spider Woman. I don't know where one stops and the other starts. To me, it's all the same thing. So what helps for us to be clear about is to never ever deny the holy sacred potential that you have to make something exist that didn't exist without you. It's blasphemous to say I'm not creative, so none of you can ever say that again. And you must think of yourself as the one who wakes up in the morning to an empty canvas of 24 hours and figures out how to splash beauty onto that. And even more poignantly, how to have it be something that it excites people and inspires people and helps them gather new feelings and reflections on their whole spiritual experience. You know, I suspect that everyone on this call has already left the old ways behind and figured out what you believe in as your own spiritual agent. You know, you stop, if you're Catholic, I suspect many of you stopped saying the Apostles' Creed a long time ago and let line after line go until one day you write your own Apostles' Creed. That's how it works, right? Because it didn't end with Isaiah, Daniel, and Jeremiah. We're the ongoing prophets, right? We're the ongoing writers of the new sacred text. So I'm going to give us an example. First, I can ask if anybody wants to. I don't know, Lena, if you can see, but if anyone had any questions or concerns about the film we watched that they want me to speak to, I'm happy to answer any questions if you were troubled by any part of that. Let's get that out of the way. But I can't see everybody all at once.
Right. And you can also put your questions in the chat as well.
Can they raise their hand if they have a question, they can just raise their hand and go like this, right? Will you see them?
I will see them, but I'm not seeing anyone yet.
Okay, good. So everyone was happy and loved. We are the creators. That's the kind of news I like to hear. All right. What are you drawing attention to? And what energy or action are you inspiring? That's a big question for you. If you haven't considered yourself an artist, even then, you're still drawing attention to something, right? Whenever I feel a need or something's missing, I go big on it because I think big and I have a big, huge ego that's always trying to get my attention. And I like to try out new things. And so when I encounter a problem, I turn it into something. And the first problem I encountered, right, well, it took me around the world because Ronald Reagan was president and I was getting very anxious about all that nuclear proliferation stuff. Remember the weapons buildup we were doing and Russia was doing it. And it was like, oh my God, what's happening? And I was a photographer activist at the time. So I had been at every single anti-nuclear demonstration march in Montreal and Ottawa and New York City, where there was 1 million of us, and Detroit and all these places. So I made a slideshow of our demonstrations for a world that we can believe in. And so I'm working as a picture framer one day, and I come in and on my workbench is a book called The 100th Monkey. Now, probably most of you know about it, so I'm not going to repeat it. I read it on my lunch hour that day, and after I read it, it had such an impact on me. It's a teeny little book that I went across the street to the bank and gave the teller $20 and said, here's the beginning of my peace pilgrimage around the world. As soon as I get 5,000, I'm going to go. Right. She goes, yeah, right. She didn't even know what to make of me. She didn't even make eye contact with me. But it continued. I got 3 or 4 more jobs. It took me a year and a half. I saved up my $5,000 and I started in Tokyo making a peace pilgrimage. So it's often starts with anxiety or grief or sorrow. You know, I can't tell you how many recent widows I've talked to who all think they should write a book because they managed to live through that awful, awful grief. And when we experience something with the impact of the loss of a partner, we can't help but want to turn it into something useful. I mean, you walk from room to room and fling yourself on beds and cry for the first while. And then it can be turned into something. So when I came back from that peace pilgrimage around the world, I didn't know who I was because something big had changed for me. I started out as a social activist, but I came home a spiritual contemplative. And I didn't know, how did that happen? I hardly knew what words to use, but I had to move away from the city and find a place way up in northern New York, near the California or near the Canadian border, and live there in this old farmhouse until I could figure out what had happened, because I had experienced all the world religions on that trip. So deep into Buddhism, deep into Hinduism, deep into Judaism. And that opened the mind of this Christianized kid who only had been taught all things Catholic and all things Christian. So that created such turmoil for me not angst really, but just opened up my head, cracked me open, that I decided I have to write a book to understand it. So I just took country by country, Japan, China, Hong Kong, Greece, Israel, Palestine, India, whatever, and write in a chronological order, wrote what had happened to me. So by the end of that writing, I could put it together. But it was a problem. And I'm the kind of extrovert that doesn't understand what's muddling inside me until I express it somehow outside of me. And so that's my healing work, to figure out how to turn the inside mud puddle into something so clear it fits beautifully in a crystal glass. And that's the process of creativity for me. It's all mixed up with my spirituality because my spiritual teachers direct me toward justice, toward kindness and mercy. So, I went into the convent when I was 18. And my first theology instructor, Father Grabis, taught us how to separate faith from religion. It was a very, very difficult semester, but he said, okay, religion is like a bunch of books, doctrine, put it high up on that shelf and we're not going to visit it at all through this whole semester. Because you all who are about to marry Jesus, you got to figure out what is your spirituality. And it certainly is not that religion. So he was reading Paul Tillich at the time and tried to get us to proclaim our ultimate concerns, our ultimate commitments, because that's really what your living spirituality ends up being based on. What is it that you're ultimately committed to? And as an 18-year-old, they were big, fat questions that we all struggled with terribly. But I finally said, I'm committed to being a light in the world. I'm committed to having there be justice wherever I stand. And I'm committed for speaking out for anyone that is voiceless or marginalized. I will advocate for them. And that's my living faith, which was pretty good because 2 years after I came to that conclusion, not only was I dismissed from the convent for being gay, but also told by my confessor at the Catholic Church that I wasn't going to get absolution until I committed to stop being gay. So me and the Catholic Church went our separate ways. So I have made my life a living, faithful expression based on those ultimate commitments that have never changed for me. So when we talk about evolutionary creativity, we weave in there your own journey towards higher levels of spiritual intelligence. You're doing it. I'm hoping and half believing that every one of you have a meditative practice in your life. I'm never going to ask you to raise your hands, but I'm just going to say this. You can have a great life without one, but you cannot have an extraordinary life that you came here to have unless you sit alone quietly for 20 minutes a day. Just getting that out of my system. Your life can be great, but it cannot be the magnificent, extraordinary life you're here to have if you don't sit quietly alone. I'll give it to you 10 minutes a day. Because if you commit to 10, you will find yourself adding to it. I've added to it. I started in 1990 in a little bit of a snit because I wasn't happy about having a spiritual practice, but my psychic nun friend told me to. So I said, all right, 20 minutes, growl, growl. And now I'm in my bed doing it every single day. I'm there for an hour. Because what could be better? You know, Emily Dickinson says, the only news I get is bulletins all day from immortality. We're like satellite dishes to mind at large, to supreme intelligence. That's way better than CNN. Once you begin to decipher the code, right? So it just takes some practice is all. So, you know what? I don't like just doing all the talking here. So I'm going to give us a chance to see if anybody has a hand up, or I'm going to actually look through this gallery myself to see if anybody wants to say anything, because it's really not good for one person to be doing all the talking. I'm going to have us go into a little group, which is far easier than getting any of you to raise your hand. So what I'm going to ask you to share in your small group, I'll put you in groups of 4. You can have about 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 3 possible questions, and you can go with whatever one you want. The first one is to shake up your own, what we all learned about creativity, is to admit that something exists in the world because you're alive. It might be a garden that you created. It might be a winning chili recipe. It might be, you know, a kindergarten class full of kids that feel confident about themselves and loved because you made that happen. So think outside that box called write a book, make a picture, go to ballet class. Think outside that formal box and let yourself expand your ideas of what exists in the world. I'll tell you, I'm sitting here looking at my friend, Pat Widauer. And I know because she used to live here in San Diego with us, and she was a hospice chaplain, and was a chaplain at Grossmont Community Hospital, I think. She went everywhere being a chaplain. And that, it's hard to say what exists in the world because she did that, but you know, those people found it easier to let go, less fearful because she sat there and sang with them, right? It's just keeping company with people who have anxiety because we have no idea what's the next step out there. So think like that. What decisions, what courses, what rivers have you gone down that have led you to be this person and will take responsibility for saying, this exists in the world because of me, and forget anything they ever told you about humility and pride. This is your chance to say, I have made a mark. So we're going to go now, whatever magic they do to keep this up. Put me in a group and I'm going to be quiet, but I'll witness.
Perfect. Everyone is going to be automatically pulled into a group, and I have them set up to go for 10 minutes. And then when 10 minutes is up, they'll automatically close and you'll have 30 seconds before you're drawn back to this group. So I know that can be a little abrupt. And for those following along on YouTube, I invite you just to take a moment to reflect yourself on this query of, and I have put it in the chat, what exists in the world because I am alive?
I said I'd give them some options. So
right.
I also put in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
What are you drawing attention to? What's the thing? When people see you coming, they go, oh yeah, she's going to draw attention to this. If you're more known for that, if you have that kind of regularity of what you draw attention to. You can talk about it right here.
Mm.
It has to do with your heartbreak and your heart's desire, which we'll talk about later. What are you inspiring in the world? So any one of those 3 questions, to just share about any one of them in your little group, and we'll come back in 10 minutes.
Wonderful. All right, I'm opening these rooms now. Thank you, Jan. Welcome back. Welcome back. I think everyone will be joining us here in about 10 seconds. There we go. Here's everyone. Welcome back, everyone. And where is Jan?
I think
Jan?
is not unmuted.
Did I get muted? Somebody muted me by mistake.
Oh no. It may have been everyone was when they came back from the groups. My apologies.
All right. So Hafiz is a great poet. He's been translated by Daniel Ladinsky. And he's got a poem called Why Aren't We All Screaming Drunks? I sent it out to my peeps on, I think it was New Year's Day, appropriate. But it's very short, but it has a very big punch to it. And it starts out by saying, every single day, the sun peeks out from behind the clouds and lights up the whole cosmos. And God peeks out from behind the veil. And with this going on, why aren't we all screaming drunks? Hafiz's guess is this: any thought that you're better or less than another quickly breaks the wine glass. Any thought that you're better or less than another quickly breaks the wine glass. So I thought of that during our little breakout room because we had a kindergarten teacher and we were talking about how happy and perfect those kindergarten kids were. Too bad we had to grow up and get bad, something like that. And so Hafiz came to mind because we get into I wish I could be like my kindergartner self. I was so much more pure and better and this and that. So I think Hafiz is saying that you're in trouble if you think you're better than or if you think you're less than. So always to be neutralizing, and particularly there would be the temptation to do that with me because I'm a creating maniac. I cannot stop myself. And so do never compare yourself with me because that would be awful, because I am here to do this and you are here to do yours, what you're called to do, the thing that brings you joy. I don't have children. I don't have a partner. I don't have anyone in my life right now who's demanding any of my time. So I am really free to create. And you've got busy lives. And I'm not trying to come up with excuses for you, but I am trying to drive this one home. Figure out your day. Wake up in the morning and say, what are you going to put into that day that gives you equal amounts of what I learned to be the formula for bliss for me in the convent? Because when you go into that novitiate, it's like boot camp. They order your days, every minute of your day. And what I found out was they balanced our days with perfect pieces of community, solitude, prayer, and service. And that's why I was so happy there, because lots of time alone, lots of time in community, lots of time in prayer, and lots of time doing service. So that's my formula for bliss. Yours might be a different calculation, but figure out what it is. ask yourself, when was I most happy? And what was I doing in that day? Even if you were in Maui, what were you doing there? Swimming, sitting under the banyan tree, right? Walking along the sand. Just help figure out what are the requirements, because you got to recreate those circumstances in a way. If you know that you need X amount of solitude to have a great day, and you've got 10 kids and 24 grandkids, you got to make a plan, because people will invade our lives if we let them. So, and that's not bad. It's good that they're rapping at our door, because that means you're magnetic. But we have to know what boundaries to make and keep and honor. And that's part of your spiritual intelligence work. I'm going to read for you now a poem that I came across about, 10, 15 years ago. That's called Wings. It's a poem by Susan Stewart. And I loved it so much. So I'm going to shower this on you, and then the next thing will happen. Two people talking. If you could have wings, would you want them? I don't know. I mean, if you could use them to fly, would you want them? Well, yes, if I could fly, but they would be really big. How big? They might brush against your knees as you walked, or be bigger than some doorways. And what if you could never take them off? Yes, I would. I would still want them. Because you could fly? Yes, because of the flying. And if they were heavy, or even if no one else had them, and even if your children and their children didn't have them, yes, I think so. But you would still have arms and hands and legs, and you could still speak, but you had wings too. You would want the wings too? Yes, I would want the wings too. And when you were walking around, people would stare at you, and they wouldn't necessarily understand that you could fly. I understand. I understand that they wouldn't understand. Or if people thought they meant something they didn't really mean, I would know what the wings were for. And if you had them forever, the forever I mean, that is your life, you would still want them? Yes, I would want them. I would take them, so long as I could fly, that I might fly away, that I might fly away where the ships, that I might fly away where the ships of pine wood pass between the dark cliffs. And that's how she ended it. And I always loved it so much. What was it? There's no heavy duty punchline. Anyway, it inspired me. And it inspired me a few years later to write a poem like that, a conversation between two people, questions and answers. And this, I believe, is an example of evolutionary creativity, because it has the commons in mind. So I'll read you mine. It's in this book. There are burning bushes everywhere. It's on my website. It's all photographs and short poems. It's a beautiful book. So this is called The Conversation. A conversation in the year 2050, 2050, so it's in the future, between a boy and his grandfather. Grandpa, did you know it was happening? Well, sort of. There was some news about it, but it didn't seem too real. How did it feel when you couldn't eat the fish anymore? Well, that was hard. We never thought that would happen. Didn't they warn you? Not really. I guess some tried to, but not in a big way. Not like on television or even much in the newspapers. You had to really want to know. People just didn't care that much. We were too busy back then, pretty caught up in our own lives. What about the forests? Didn't you know how much we needed them just to breathe? People never thought about that connection, son. We needed that timber. Companies needed it for their business. That's what was important back then, business. But why would you let them take away everything we needed? Why did you let them make all those stupid things out of plastic? Why didn't you save some of the oil for us? I swear we never thought we'd use it up. We weren't trained to think about the future. No one taught us how to think. We did the best we could do day by day. I thought you were smart. You had your own business, didn't you? Yes. Well, if you were so smart, why didn't you stop them from ruining all the water? Didn't you ever think I might want to swim like you used to? It's not like that. Oh, yes, it is. If you were so smart, you would have known what was happening, but you didn't care. It's your fault. It's not my fault, son. There were millions of us here. Everyone was to blame. Then why didn't they stop it? Why do they ruin things for us? Why didn't you care enough to do something? Why? 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 So, inspired by Susan Stewart's Wings. So you find what forms you like. I just pulled this out because as a former Catholic, well, you can't be former Catholic because it's cellularly installed. So as a Catholic, I have really loved putting new wine in the old wineskins. So I'm gonna sing a couple lines of a psalm I wrote, which one of the people on this call, her voice is singing. If you get my CD and listen to the psalms that we sang, Pat Wiedauer, I don't see her in the box now, but she's singing on this song too. It's a Gregorian chant kind of song. I'm only going to sing the first few lines for you to get what I mean by evolutionary creativity. Our temples and churches are crumbling. The young ones cannot find what they are seeking. We ourselves are the word. Our lives and stories are the ongoing revelation. The creation is the Holy One unfolding. Everywhere we look, we see the infinite. Though trouble is upon us, so is loveliness. Behind the face of hatred is the face of love. Though we come from many lands, we are rooted in the same soil. From this earth we have risen, and to her we shall return. So it goes on because being a novice, we went every morning, said lauds, every afternoon, said vespers. And it was a glorious time. Half of the chapel chanting one, half of the chapel the other, the back and forth, the living sense of living prayer, really beautiful. But the words from the Old Testament aren't suitable. They don't fit me right. So write your own psalm, write your own lamentation. You know, I have a camp on a lake in upstate New York. And one morning I was there in October, and there was this shimmering light like aurora borealis coming down the hallway right into my bedroom. I didn't know what was up. I ran to the end of the hallway, looked out the window, and it was the colorful trees, red, orange, yellow, reflected in the mirror of the lake, and a breeze had come along. And so all those colors got shaken up and transmitted toward me. I was in the middle of writing my book, No Ordinary Time, which is a book of hours. And I used a lot of traditional prayer formats for it. Anyway, this light was so fascinating that I got up right out of bed, went downstairs, and opened up my screen door on the porch so I could go down to the dock and be as close to it as I could. When lo and behold, standing there in the morning, don't ask me how this happened, a woman with this pamphlet in her hand moves toward me, and she says, "Hi, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and we're trying to get more people interested in the Bible." And I said to her, "Oh my God, that's fabulous. So am I." I go, "In fact, I'm writing my own." And now she backs up and she's looking horrified. She goes, "How do you do that?" I said, "Well, it's not too hard. I just wrote a psalm this morning, and yesterday I did 2 lamentations. And then the light does its thing again, and I look out at the lake, and I said, oh my God, there's our burning bushes." And when I came back to look at her, she was running up the driveway. It was all like too much for her. But I'm telling you, we're the writers, we're the materializers, we're the manifestors of the new sacred text, the new sacred thoughts, which causes indivisibility, right? It causes unity. It's beyond dualistic thinking. So what we do to get ourselves beyond the right and wrong, black and white, all those things, particularly now in these times when we're looking at, you know, racism, sexism, all those isms through a different lens as cultural co-creators. Because no matter where you live, that place looks like it looks because you live there. It has your signature on it. Wherever you are, you have left a trail, and you want to know, what are your tracks, right? You want to know what has mattered to you and how have you shared that matters. You know, some years ago, I was really worried about the polar bears. Worry. I see these commercials. I'm like, oh my God, the poor polar bears. I must go to see them. Go up to Churchill. You have to go on a tour. You can't by yourself go see polar bears. So I joined this environmental group that's going up there, buy myself a new long lens. And the polar bears came up so close to our, whatever it's, tundra buggy, that I was shooting with a wide angle lens and getting their whole feet in because they came right up as soon as they smelled our soup. But I got so close to those bears, and I looked at them and I sensed them, and I just stopped worrying about them. But when we have our heartbreak caused by something that's going on in this world, we tend to move in that direction. And that is the solution for what do we do now? What do I do next? And my advice is you figure out what's breaking your heart the most, and you figure out what brings you the most joy, and you figure out how to connect them in a way that does good in that area of whatever is breaking your heart.
Thank you so much, Jan. I don't know if you're ready for Q&A. I do have some questions that folks have been submitting through the evening. And I don't mean to cut you off if there's more you'd like to say before we.
Cut off by these brilliant questions.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, then I will share a couple of these. Someone was really struck by your language earlier where you spoke about deciphering the code kind of from the divine or from, you were calling it like collective wisdom, collective consciousness. Can you say more about deciphering the code, or discernment is the word we use in Quaker spaces?
Yeah, so you got an invisible dance partner. You open yourself up like a satellite dish. You go, I'm taking the call. All right, I'm here. And what do we get? What did Emily Dickinson mean when she talked about the only news she gets is bulletins all day from immortality? I fancy myself getting bulletins. There's no spitballs coming my way. There's no telegrams. No one's knocking at the door. But community, communion, communication is occurring. I am in some kind of waltz or tango or foxtrot with this partner, my source, who's trying to communicate to me. But you want to say he, because all our lives they say he. I'm not colluding in that, but this force, I believe, is transmitting intelligence to us. I think of it as supreme intelligence. Supreme intelligence fell in love with supreme love, and they had a baby called the cosmos. And I am a creature of the cosmos. And my mother and father are communicating with me, but they do it through silence. So I have to sit in silence in order to understand. I can't be yakking on a Zoom call when I get to be God, if you will, right? All of our being is made up of the substance that came right out of the Big Bang. If all this atomic stuff, if all of this, what goes into our bodies and our intelligence and our imagination is not divinity, I don't know what is. So I always feel like I'm a particle version of the waveform divinity, right? When it's divinity, it's a wave. When it's matter, it's me, right? And, you can't go around saying these things because people don't like it. But it's just what I think is true. So I ask all the time, what? And then I figure out, oh yeah, do that. Okay. My book is done. What now? So then all of a sudden I have a journal there, and all of a sudden I write down, stop seeking, start finding. So that comes in my prayer time. I consider it a bulletin from immortality, but I'm not here to say to everybody, you're going to get this every day. There's, 5 days out of a week, I'm in that space thinking about groceries and going to the gym, right? I'm not saying, oh, enlighten one here. It doesn't happen that way. But the jewels, when they come, are so precious that you want to sit there so you won't miss it if this is if it's your day,
Mm.
you don't want to miss it. And you don't want to miss the opportunity to say, thank you. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Only in a more silent and reverential way. Right?
I appreciate the joy and the loud too. I imagine the divine does as well. Another question submitted here. If you have any recommendations in particular for folks who feel worn out, particularly due to age or due to being overly active.
My photo is not in there though, so I don't know what that
It's
is.
not in there?
I'm sorry?
Oh,
What's not in there?
that was a mistake. Sorry, Jan.
Okay. Yeah, for feeling worn out, right? I go into my bedroom every day around 2. I always say I'm going to allow myself to have a nap, even though I hardly ever do, because I have 17 magazines there to read. But I go in there with the intention of napping.
Mm.
I give myself, just this year, I gave myself permission to read a novel in the middle of the day.
Mm.
Always came down to me like, do not be reading novels in the middle of the day. My mother would always check me on that, right? So we're overcoming. This is spiritual intelligence, taking responsibility for your own beliefs. I believe it's the greatest thing you can do is lie down in the middle of the afternoon and read a novel. You know, that helps you be the person you want to be when the people come around you. If you're tired, bubble baths are in order, right? I have a guy come here once a week, give me a massage tomorrow morning. That's become a minimum weekly requirement for me. Now I have to figure out how to come up with $60 a week, but it's my priority. It's more important than going to the movies or going to the zoo. So it's up to us because there are no outside forces supporting you and giving you suggestions to how to get over being worn out. Stop what you're doing for one thing and catch your breath and say, you have given yourself your whole life, because you all have. Look at the ways you've given yourself your whole life. And now you get to be rewarded with bubble baths and massages and naps, casual lunches with friends and novels and TV series, whatever. It's all okay. I just watched Godless. I just binged on Godless. It's like, oh man, take me away. Just take me away. And they do. So I never give myself a hard time for that because I work really hard. And even if I only am in this office 3 or 4 hours a day, I'm making beautiful things happen. I make beautiful music. I make beautiful books. I have artist creeds. I'll tell you what, I'm going to read this. It's called the Artist Creed. I'm going to read the first 3 and I'll tell you the backstory, which is the first time I went to teach at a women's writing class, they're all raising their hands telling me why they're not doing anything, why they're not writing. I don't have time. I don't believe in myself. I don't have a place to write. They had all one excuse after the other. And we had a whole week to be together. I had called my class, Marry Your Muse. And so I said, you guys are really going to have to get in touch with your muses because you're nothing but a barrel of excuses. This won't do. They paid a fortune to be there at a writers' conference for a whole week, and now they're not writing. So we burrowed in, made contact with Holy Spirit, otherwise known as your muse. And Holy Spirit spoke to us. And they all got messages and communications. They wrote a letter that was communicated to them by Spirit. And the last day we had a wedding ceremony and they were going to marry their muse. And so they wrote vows. And as it turns out, each vow was a direct reframe of the complaint they made on day 1. So I am just going to read you 3 and tell you something fun. I believe I am worth the time it takes to create whatever I feel called to create. I believe my work is worthy of its own space, which is worthy of the name sacred. I believe that when I enter this space, I have the right to work in silence, uninterrupted, for as long as I choose. And it goes on, there's 10 of them. But I'll tell you what, I only made this for those 20 women that were in my class. I think it was before computers were a big thing, and I printed them out on nice stock and snail mailed them to everybody and said, put this, wherever you do your work, put this. And then my partner at the time, Annie, comes in. I go, here, look at the Artist Creed. I'm done now. She goes, done? She goes, those are the chapters for your book called Marry Your Muse. And I never even imagined it. But Annie said, are you kidding? These are all just chapter headings. So I wrote the book Marry Your Muse. And that changed my life because it changed my whole direction to now all I do is facilitate groups of primarily women to open up their vast wilderness of jewels to be discovered and figure out with them what's their medium.
Mhm.
So, the little things start little. I write the psalm. The next thing you know, we're singing it in a recording studio. The next thing you know, there's community of nuns in Nebraska singing it together. It's, these are the ripple effects of our loving energy.
Mm.
So you have to ask yourself, what's breaking my heart and what do I love doing? And then put those two things together. If you love golfing and what's breaking your heart is crap in the ocean, then organize a golf tournament to raise money for a day's worth of people to go clean up the crap on the ocean or whatever. That's how it works. You figure out what hurts, you figure out what's fun, and then you do it together, because you don't get old and tired and worn out as long as you're doing what's fun. You do less of it because you need those 2 hours in the afternoon for the nap or the bubble bath or the massage. You do less of it, but you're more potent now because you're smart as the dickens. We know shit because we've experienced it and we've transformed it into our stories.
Mhm.
So you be a good storyteller, if nothing else.
Mhm.
Are there other questions?
We maybe have time for one more if there's another one out there. I did get a couple here, so I'm gonna, unless there's someone else who has a question, I do have a couple here folks have been submitting. All right, I'll share this one. Can you say more about silence and about the external messages? There's been a couple questions about when I sit in silence, it doesn't feel like silence, or when I get a message, I don't know if it's external.
Every message you get is external. Where do you think it comes from? William Tiller's a physicist, and he's got it. He even did a graphic description of how it works. First thought is implanted from spirit, right? So spirit puts thought into our mind, our brain, whatever. Then, out of thousands of the thoughts that we have, you look and you say, oh, I like that one. Oh, whoa, I want to work with that one, right? The thoughts, if I had 4 thoughts this morning, one of them was, you need to do more cardio workout. You ought to write a new book. You should go to Maui or fly back to New York and spend a week in your camp. I would go for the Maui one, right? You always go for the best joy because that's what's motivating for us. And so to let yourself actually experience that if there is an active intelligence that was the source of us and the source of this cosmos, and if that intelligence is communicating with us, the only way we can get it is in silence when our trap is shut. The only way you can discern it is if you get in the habit. You know what they say, it takes 21 days to break a habit or start a new habit. You might sit in silence for 21 days. And then finally on the 22nd day, you go, oh, I got it. It might take that for you. For me, on day one, I get a song delivered to me. I thought it was a poem, a rhymey poem, but got my guitar out, turned out to be a song. And it became the first song on my first CD. It's called Rebecca's Song. So things drift in, but if you're not penetrable, if you haven't opened up your antenna, if you don't really mean it, that you're engaged in this thing, then it won't happen. And every single day, I light my candles, I get in my bed, I stare at the candles, and I have to redefine God every single day.
I love that experiential commitment, Jan. And it's reminding me too, I'm sitting here looking at some of the comments come in, and I'm appreciating that Pendle Hill is a place we get to have these sort of interfaith conversations and experiments, because of course, in our Quaker tradition, the idea of God as external is actually not fully in alignment with the theology. The theology is that the spirit is within all of us. And so those messages are coming from that of God, which is in us. So I'm just really appreciating how you're bringing the authenticity of your spiritual journey. And I just want to acknowledge some of the comments that are coming my way. And that what I hear in all of them is the value of listening. Because I absolutely know for myself in my Quaker practice, just because I believe some of those voices are from the divine within me, doesn't mean I hear them. It doesn't mean I'm listening very well all the time. And it takes that practice of discernment as well to know, well, is this my ego, or is this that of the divine that is this offering this message to me? So I just wanted to.
I never say, is this my ego or is this God? I never say that. I just, it's all the same. We're all the same. If it's about love, if it's peaceful, if it's about justice, I'm not worried about my ego ever. But let's just say this. Pendle Hill is a great place to go. It's in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia, near Swarthmore. I've taught there a few times. Hopefully when COVID's over, I'll teach again. But let me just say this, for any of you who are not on my newsletter list or do not get my bulletins from Immortality, go to janphillips.com and sign up, because I'll keep you posted about the events that are coming up. I'm going to be next month in Illinois at Women's Center.
Beautiful. I just put that website there in the chat. And before we come to our close, I'll also just extend the invitation in the chat to everyone who, if you would like to experiment more with silence and more with this communal listening, at Pendle Hill, we have our meeting for worship in the morning, every morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, which is a silent worship time. I'll put that in the chat as well as an offering invitation. And Jan, do you have any closing thoughts for us before we go?
Yes, I have the thought that every one of you here is sitting on a really important expression that's divinity itself, that's waiting for you to express it. It could be just your joyfulness to know you're part of this cosmos, you're part of the healing of it, and you're part of the solution of these tragic times in our nation. And you could just go have lunch with somebody, wear your mask if you need to, but make a connection with somebody that says, I'm full of life because I know I am a contribution toward the good. You're full of joy because you know you're a contribution toward the good. That's every one of you on this call. So share that joyfulness, that abundance. It's early in the new year. We need all of us to keep our hope, to keep our vision, and to keep making intimate connections with as many people as we can during these weird ass times.
Thank you so much. What a perfect close